What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video today, and today we're going to be discussing one of the top FPSs of the 6th generation, and that is TimeSplitter Future Perfect. It is one of the most well-received FPS games of all time, and we're going to be giving a retrospective of what made this one of the best games of its generation and why it shouldn't be looked over the classic TimeSplitters 2. But before we get into it, I want to take a second to promote this channel. If you like retrospective content and reviews of old classic games, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. And also, if you want to learn about news and reviews of modern games, go to the link down below to my main channel where I cover all that stuff in general gaming discussions, reviews, and stuff like that of everything going on in the modern gaming world. But anyways, let's get into it. So TimeSplitter Future Perfect was developed by Free Radical, and it was debuted on the GameCube, PS2, as well as the original Xbox. Future Perfect is the final game in the trilogy that helped push the boundaries of level design and different gameplay sequences that weren't common at the time. To provide a little bit of a story overview of the game, in 2401, Sergeant Cortez is traveling to the war-torn Earth with the time crystals when his ship is shot down. Marines escort him to the military base en route of the TimeSplitters, and unknown human assassins attack them. At the base, the general and his assistant Anya are finishing a time machine. Cortez is sent back in time to prevent the TimeSplitters from ever existing. So as for the setting in this game, it is a sci-fi time traveling game that takes you to many different time periods as well as settings that you are embarked in this time traveling adventure that you're trying to take down the evil villain that you're going against. This is where I think the game really sets itself apart compared to other FPS games, is because of this time jumping, because each level is a different era and a different setting that allows you to get a little bit more creative in what they're able to do and the type of guns they want to introduce, the type of different levels they want to bring to life. For example, it starts you off in the 1940s, then to the 60s, the 90s, the 2050s, and then even as far as the 25th century, which is where Cortez, your main character, is originally from. In this installment of the franchise, we see them dive a little deeper into the story compared to the previous games, because you really start to understand the type of person that Cortez is, which you don't really get as much in the first two games. As you play the game, you start to learn that Cortez is kind of this goofy, corny guy with jokes, with catchphrases, but then with time, you start to get very familiar with the type of person that he was. And I think this is where the game really starts to separate itself between the amount of cutscenes and the little bit more emotions, and a lot of that is probably due to the fact that maybe higher budgets or just the first two being a little bit more of a proof of concept, especially the first one, that is. But I think this is where they kind of stretch their legs a little bit more to allow you to kind of understand the type of like essential goofball that this dude is. And for example, here's a clip in a cutscene that you get, and it's honestly pretty funny, and it's pretty cool, so check this out.
This should take us to Crow's secret lab.
I'm ready.
I pressed it already.
Yeah, right. So, been with the agency long?
Yeah. 3 years in May.
You get dental?
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah! Time to split!
I'll get the next one.
Also, on each mission, you have this companion that goes to the level with you, who has their own essential motive of being there, why they're helping Cortez, and how they can kind of come together to both get what they want. You also have the main villain, which is Jacob Crow. The main villain, you don't really go too much into the villain at all. You only ever see him when he comes face to face with Cortez, which is pretty normal for the time. They don't really dive too deep into bad guys back then. It was more so about the hero and the world that he was set in. But overall, there's no major characters in this game that you really start to learn more about outside of just Cortez himself. And because you don't really learn more about the villains, the companions are kind of there to kind of be there to help set the tone of the level, of whatever the setting that they're in. For example, there's a guy from the 1960s. He's dressed just like a hippie from them, with the mustache and long hair and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of little things that you don't really get to learn so much about that. Maybe you would like. I would like to learn a little bit more about the person in the ear of Cortez, Anya, or maybe even the general or something like that. But who knows, down the road, the future of TimeSplitters is kind of up in the air, which is no pun intended. But yeah, but I will say overall that they kind of make it known that the game is not meant to be taken super seriously. Even though it's about saving humanity and going back in time to prevent a total destruction, it is meant to be taken as this funny time traveling adventure where you just need to take out this bad guy who stops it. So they kind of tone down the seriousness of it, or it never really was that serious even compared to the previous game. So that's kind of how they want you to set it up. It's just kind of a more gung-ho fun story that you're just there for, just to provide a reason of why you're going to these different time periods and kind of give them an explanation of why we have these certain type of different enemies or certain type of different guns and stuff like that, which I don't mind. Sometimes a fun game is just fun. It doesn't have to have this crazy story. But speaking of the game, let's talk about the gameplay mechanics. So I played this game on the Xbox One. As for controls, there was a full button mapping, so you can set the controls to whatever you want. So I set them to, your traditional modern controls. I'm not sure if the game originally had this feature, if this was something they put in after the fact when they were doing the backwards compatibility program, but I'm not sure. But overall, playing it on modern hardware, I found this game not to be clunky at all and to be very smooth for the most part. I played it on normal difficulty, so for the most part, it was pretty easy. I didn't really have any tough time really getting through levels. There's like a couple moments where I would struggle and have to reset, but then eventually I get it. So, but like I said, it's not the toughest of games. Like, it could be hard. I played it on normal difficulty, so yeah. And as for the unique features that I saw in the gameplay mechanics was the different weapons and vehicles that you can control. So for example, there's one mission where you're driving this tank, you're going through the tank, you're shooting down other tanks, and you also can be the gunner on the second time go around, because there's a lot of moments in the story where you're playing throughout the level and then you run into your future self, and your future self helps you, and then the tides turn, the roles reverse once you actually are now the future person talking to the past one. So it's kind of cool. They do that a lot with the vehicles. And then also there's one where you're in this massive mech suit where you're taking out jets and fighters. So it's pretty cool that they were able to diversify that a little bit. And also there's a wide variety of different bosses that you fight in each mission, and all of them are usually tied to the time of era, the era that you're in, the period, and kind of killing them and taking them out with the weapons that you have of that time. So that's something that I really appreciate, because for example, there's this one mid-level boss where it's just this giant mech boss that you're trying to take out, and you're like, whoa, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. So things like that, a lot of like little set pieces that really try to make this game a little bit more grand in that sense. Now, as for the visual design and the graphics and sound, I think the graphics are really amazing for its time. The game was really pushing these consoles to their limits back then, especially this game, because it came out towards the end of its generation. It was released in 2005, and just a couple years later was when we got the Xbox and the PlayStation 3. So they were kind of pushing things a little farther than maybe the first two installments did. I thought the environments were very detailed. You move and interact with a lot of different things. For example, like you're on the rooftop and you're controlling the computers and things like that, or turrets and other like little gadgets. So you can kind of interact with a lot of things, and even just like going to like certain soda machines, a bunch of sodas will come out, or computers will open and close. So I thought that was really neat, and it did kind of remind me of a lot of little stuff that you saw in these like games back then, that they used to add these little minute things that you can interact with, which nowadays only a select few games that I can think of are really like that. As for the animations, I thought the animations were okay in terms of gun animations and reloads. They all kind of felt pretty repetitive for the most part, or they just weren't there. It was just kind of a cooldown sequence. But the cutscenes I thought looked amazing. They nailed the facial expressions. They were pretty much on point. The way he was going through the portals, talking, smiling, laughing. And for that time, a lot of those faces seemed to be very similar, and you didn't really get a lot of different facial expressions. And this game really pushed that in a sense where, man, you can see every single little moment and eyebrow raise and stuff like that that you just didn't really get too often, or if you did, it wasn't to the level of what I saw. I thought the cutscenes were honestly incredible. As for the music and the soundtrack, I loved the soundtrack. The music was cool. It had that futuristic kind of early 2000s vibe that you just don't really hear anymore, and just kind of like just pure like video game music. It wasn't like they took like Sonic, for example, where they're taking like rock music or something like that. It had like its own unique vibe to it that really fit the tone super well. So I love the menu music on this game. Honestly, I think this game has aged really well. It's something that you can hop in for now and just pretty much enjoy your time with it. It's super fun. I recommend playing this on modern hardware because it is available for backwards compatibility in all the modern consoles for the PlayStation 4 and 5, as well as the Xbox Series X and S. So I played it on the Xbox One, and I know you can play it on the PS5 and 4 as well. So sadly, the game doesn't have multiplayer anymore, which sucks. I wish I could go back at the time and be able to play that. I've never really played online games back then. I was more so a single player guy. And this would be a fun game, I think, with all the different weapon varieties and stuff you can do, and the map maker, the map editor, which I think is awesome. It'd be awesome to kind of go back and do that, because it's just, you know, obviously times changed and the servers are getting shut down and stuff like that. Now, in terms of any sequels, I know there's a lot of people asking for sequels and spin-offs and even remasters or something like that. So from the last that I heard and the research that I found, TimeSplitters 4 was in development for almost a year, but delayed after Free Radical went into administration and subsequently bought out by Crytek on August 17, 2009. The project was declared on hold shortly after that, and in an interview with Crytek UK, they claimed that they would continue the project once the high industry demand was there for such a game. On May 19, 2021, Deep Silver announced that a new TimeSplitter game will be developed by the previously disbanded Free Radical Design. But shortly after, about a year and a half, in December 2023, Free Radical Design was closed down amidst a wide-scale company restructuring at Embracer Group. So that's kind of sad to hear that. I would love to see another game, but it seems like this game's just going to get lost into the ether and never really be made again. I would be shocked if in our lifetime that ever comes back, which if I had to guess, probably not. I can't imagine EA or whoever has the rights currently is willing to give up on that. It's kind of rare to see them, unless somebody buys out whoever, all these IPs and these licensed IPs. I don't really expect much to be done with it. The most we can hope for is somebody to do a spiritual successor to the game, which I think is potentially inevitable, but I guess we will see. Now, this game has a lot of influence in the FPS space. It's a game that a lot of people look back on as one of the reasons why the genre got pushed to the level that it did. It was right towards the end of that 6th generation where we started to get more games that were really sticking out. Games like this, games like Metroid Prime, and a couple others that just really helped push that genre forward. Obviously, Halo, you can't go without talking about Halo. And it helped lead into the 7th generation of the PlayStation and the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 of really kind to make FPS a real staple. And I think this was one of those games that really pushed that. As for the nostalgia factor for this, the levels set in the early 2000s, a lot of these levels were set in this like era of the future that we thought was going to be in the early 2000s. So a lot of like the chrome and the grays and the silver for whatever reason. And like from 98 to like 2007, we all thought the future 50 years from now is everything was going to be in chrome and everybody's dressed in black, just like the Matrix or something like that. And there's a level in this game that is just like that, where you're going through the offices and everything's silver and chrome. And I thought that was pretty cool to kind of, you know, you kind of forget little things like that. And also is the humor, a lot of the humor that was made was very of that time and of that generation. So I thought it was pretty cool to kind of go back and play, but it still has a lot of those elements of the game that makes it pretty good for modern day gamers. Overall though, I think the game holds up well, especially on modern hardware. I would recommend checking it out. If you have a physical copy that you've held on for the years, or you find one in some retro game store or the swap market or whatever it might be, I recommend picking it up. And then if you don't want to look for the digital or the physical copy, they do sell it digitally on the Xbox store as well as the PlayStation store for like $10, and a lot of the times they're on sale. But anyways, what is your memories with TimeSplitters? Have you played the game before? If you did, what are the favorite things that you like about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, if you like more content like this, retrospective content, and like I said, if you want to check out any of the modern content, go down in the link description in the description below to check out the link to my main channel as well as this channel. And yeah, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.